to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll open it up for public comment. If anybody has any public comments they want to make. All right. Move on. We'll go to item number 4, agenda review and adoption. Moving to our motion in a second. All in favor? Opposed? All right, we'll move on to number 5, approval of the May 13th, 2024 minutes.
So moved.
Motion in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, then we'll move on to new business, 6A. We got a public hearing for interim use permit for 409 College Avenue North.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So for the Planning Commission's background, property owner KMKM LLC is requesting approval of a renewal for their interim use permit. This location is located off of 409 College Avenue North. The property is currently zoned B2 Highway Commercial Business District. The property is in identified redevelopment area. You'll see on the second page here in the memo, kind of the existing makeup of the area near the subject property. The makeup is still majority rental in this area. As you get closer to Highway 75 and over to the east with Obink Distillery, you have some commercial there that has been there for some time. The request is similar to the request that you've seen in the past for these interim use. Right now, we've been going through our rental license renewal period, and they were triggered to be up for renewal this evening. So they are seeking the maximum duration of the 5 years for the renewal. If that is recommended for approval and adopted by the council, then they would go into June 17th of 2029 for their rental use on the property. The Planning Commission does have the right to recommend a less than 5 years duration on this if you wish to. Other than that, pretty straightforward. I know the commissions have seen these in the past numerous times. So staff has prepared that finding of fact resolution, again, with that language that would extend this for another 5 years. And this does trigger that public hearing. So we would ask that that public hearing be conducted as well this evening.
Anybody have any discussion before we open the public hearing? If not, we'll open the public hearing for the interim use permit for 409 College Avenue North. Anybody wish to speak?
I have some questions if you'd be willing to come to the podium.
The house is currently under property management, with Jansky Management, and it's been, like you said, been done several times before. My mother owns it, and
Sorry, could you just state your name just for the
oh,
record?
sorry, Katie Willenbring from Cold Spring, Minnesota. Diane Schneider is my mother. And yeah.
The renewal that you're seeking, you're not looking to change or alter anything in like previous contracts struck with the city. It's just a renewal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That was my only question.
Anybody else have any questions or anything? All right, if not, we'll thank you. We'll close the public hearing. Discussion?
Yeah, for the ones that we did before, I want to say it was, Nate, remind me, is it like 3 or 4 months ago we had a bunch of these? And
Yeah, we've had them
Did we leave it at 5 years or did we shorten it?
5 years.
We did have a
Yeah.
discussion about shortening it,
Correct.
didn't we?
Correct. Yeah.
But
Ultimately,
nothing-
5 years was the one that was the path that was decided for those.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Understood.
each area is really unique just because of the makeup of what's occurring in the different areas. And, our ordinance does state that when an area is majority commercial, that you can, deny that, renewal. This one is still majority rental, because of the properties around it, so.
And I only bring that up just for you guys, because, we talk about it, like this being more rental, could make sense for 5, but if you get more of these as it goes butts up to commercial, maybe it's you lessen the 5 years to
the
2
term.
or something, but that was all I had. I knew we had a bunch of these earlier, so that was my only comment.
Any other discussion? No? If not, I think we're looking for a motion to approve resolution 2024 IUP.
I'll move.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Carries. Right. That was all the new business we have. Now we're going on to old business. 7A, short-term rental discussion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is coming back. You may recall, we had some brief surface level discussion a few months back on short-term rentals in the community. And kind of from that discussion, kind of centered around the idea of exploring the use in the downtown district only. The council did hold a workshop recently, last month. And one of the items that was on the agenda for the workshop was short-term rentals. When that was discussed with the council, there was some interest in exploring this in other zoning districts, not just the downtown district, but also into different residential districts. So there's a variety of different ways we can go with this. I guess the goal tonight is kind of just to keep a kind of a surface level conversation. Really, go through the different items, because there's 50 different plus directions that you can go. And I think a good ordinance kind of centers itself around goals that the commission and council has. And then from those goals, you kind of start to formulate a ordinance that meets those goals. So, for homework, probably next time, and we might go through some of this as we're, providing kind of a brief presentation, but it'd be good for the commission members to kind of maybe start to write down some goals that you think would suit short-term rental, and, be honest and blunt. Maybe residential isn't what some of the commission members would like to see. That will help really give a good direction to continue having conversations. But then when we get to the point of drafting language, we can really draft a ordinance or options that are meeting goals of the council and the planning commission. So for short-term rentals, just some things to kind of think about to start the conversation, and please interrupt me as we're kind of just going through my memo here. One is really to try to determine where in the community is this use appropriate. And then from there, when you start to determine that, then you start to look at how are we going to regulate that use in those different districts, because each district is going to have different types of regulations. The regulations that would apply in our downtown district is going to look different than the ones in a single family district. And for good reason. There's different conflicts that can happen in the residential versus the commercial. There's different expectations that the public has. So this, I call it a journey in this short-term rental conversation. At a certain point, there's probably appropriate to have some public comment or feedback as well when we go through this process. How that looks, could be surveys, it could be open house, could be public hearing, variety of different things. But at a certain point, it's probably good to have that. When we talk about the different districts, one thing specifically when we're looking at residential districts is, just one thing I know that the city of St. Joseph, there's a challenge in St. Joseph, and that's the total housing units and housing availability. That's a challenge that I think every community is struggling with. But in St. Joseph, we don't have a lot of homes that come on the market. And those homes that do come on the market, I know I get a lot of phone calls about, what's your rental policy for typical rental license? And I know some of those are getting bought up for that kind of rental. So not saying that short-term rental, we would still have that, but it's something to think about and consider as we're going along this journey of the short-term rental is how do we also maybe preserve some of those housing units in the community? And if it's allowed in a residential area, there's a couple of different routes, owner occupied. There's some communities that require those to be occupied by the listed owner who has a primary address at that parcel. That kind of feeds into not necessarily losing housing stock in the community, but still having flexibility. Because I think that's something I've heard too with like the council. Excuse me, the council is creating some flexibility. St. Joseph is we're known to be kind of an innovative community with the college and all that. So how do we balance those things out? Some communities have non-owner occupied. Again, that would open it up more so folks could purchase a home, do a short-term rental, and kind of be off-site, off-premise, those things. Communities, especially in larger communities, some put on caps. So in the total number of units that can be short-term rental, you'll see this in, smaller communities too. You'll see sometimes percentages tied to the total housing units in a community. So no more than 5% of our housing units can be short-term rental. But you'll also see that in like a downtown setting where say you have a multifamily building and you have 20 units there, preserving some of those units to be permanent resident occupied and putting a cap on how many of those could be converted to a short-term rental or be rented out as a short-term rental. If you have 20 apartment unit in the downtown, and not saying this is the case or would be the case, but you never know if they wanted to convert 15 of those to short-term rental. Well, now that use looks a lot different than permanent housing and that. So those kind of feed into some conversations. So also, if we're talking about like the commercial district, we just had an interim use permit, for instance. We still have a decent amount of single family properties that are still used as rental or residential that are zoned in our downtown for commercial and are part of our commercial district. So does it make sense to limit those properties on only, the sole use being just short-term rental, or maybe not? So there's different directions you can go at those. You can handle them through interim use permits as well, conditional use permits. Maybe you encourage it to be a mixed use if it's in your downtown. Methods, again, this is going to depend on the zoning district. There's typical rental license or like an annual license that you would apply for, but it'd be a short-term rental license. Defining different things. How do we define a short-term rental? What is a short-term rental? Again, going back to the owner-occupied language. And other things to consider. Again, there's a lot of different items. Parking, signage, events, violations and enforcement. That's more something on, I think, a staff level, understanding the time commitment or the capacity that staff may have. A lot of these enforcements happen after hours, so the police often will get looped into it. So how do we make sure that police know that this is a short-term rental? And then if so, how do those violations happen? Is it a 3-strike policy and then they get their license or permit revoked? How would we handle those items? Noise, of course, and nuisance. A lot of those are covered in our already existing ordinances, but you might see a increase in those requirements if it's in a residential setting. Similar to like a home occupation in a residential setting, we can put conditions. Does it make sense to put conditions on these? Number of occupants. And then one thing that I think is important is right now we collect lodging tax for the lodging establishments. So the Roadway Inn, the bed and breakfast. So I think it'd be imperative that these would be subject to that lodging tax, which also helps increase the funds that the Convention and Visitor Bureau has. So it's a lot. I hope that some of the documents I attached, helped provide some more background or just got, your brain thinking on these different things. So again, this conversation this evening can, be on whatever it is that comes to your mind. But I think to be fruitful in our next meeting, especially, is start to really think about goals that you would like to see or maybe are thinking about in terms of a short-term rental ordinance. Whether that's, again, preserving housing stock, protecting neighborhood character, things like that. So I'm going to stop talking. And I'm going to open it up a little bit here. And, again, the floor is anyone's. And yes.
I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
Just short one, real quick. This doesn't include B&Bs. B&Bs are regulated under a separate ordinance, correct?
Yeah, bed and breakfasts are regulated as and defined in our ordinance differently. Yep. So I think there's some occupancy standards and some other things within that.
So, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, 2 or 3.
Okay, sorry. I can't count today, I apologize.
No problem. Do we have already short-term rentals in the system that we know of that are VRBO or Airbnb?
So I looked more than a few times on Airbnb and VRBO and stuff, and maybe other folks have too. I didn't see any that were right in the city limits when I've looked. I don't know if that's the same for others who have looked. I've seen some on the outskirts or in other communities, but to my knowledge, I'm not aware. I know we haven't received any complaints on any.
Yeah,
that
I
would-
just did a quick search here now and I didn't see anything on either side. I mean, until you get out into more Collegeville and Avon and Lakes area.
Yeah,
So-
correct.
And can I,
Sure, jump right in.
I apologize. Go ahead, continue. I'll just stop. Because our ordinance right now doesn't address it, that means it's prohibited, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So I would say that myself, if I were a homeowner in town, as a homeowner in town, I wouldn't even think twice about, oh, I'm gonna put my home up as, as an Airbnb, I wouldn't think that there would be any need to go through any permitting process. If I'm, if it's a house that I live in and
Right, owner occupied.
it wouldn't even dawn on me that it would be something that I would have to go through.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one thing that I'm kind of struggling with a little bit because nor really I'm struggling with why it would need to be regulated.
I can see it if you.
I can see why it would be.
I do too.
I think you would, just in the sense of, are you gonna have people that are gonna come here and buy houses just strictly to do that?
Right.
I think that's kind of what you were saying, Nate, right? Is you don't want people, if homes come up for sale, to buy them to specifically just do this almost as like a rental, but now it's short term.
Yeah, I think regulation puts the expectations and the standards in a clear, hopefully transparent way. Where, yeah, it goes back to the questions of owner occupied or non-owner occupied. There has been instances and examples where folks have purchased homes just to do that kind of a use. And that can cause some conflicts. I've seen it in other communities I worked in. Whether it's over Sartell or Brainerd Lakes area is completely different because it's just tourism is like the thing, So it looks a little bit different depending on the community that it's in, but you know, as you can imagine, just like with a home occupation, if there's people that are coming and staying every night that are different, there might be some neighbors that have concerns, whether it's parking or, you know, there's examples of, you know, folks using it as a, you know, party place or something. And a lot of our other regulations would kick in and would apply. It's just a matter of, you know, how do we set the tone to, if we're gonna regulate these, how are we gonna regulate them? And what's the proper procedure?
You did mention something, a thought that I had. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't put some kind of, qualifications and ordinance in place, but most of the VRBOs and Airbnbs that I'm familiar with, as we've looked at them, it's a destination place that we're going to. We're going to New York, we're going to Phoenix, we're going for some, some sort of touristy type thing. And I'm wondering, besides Joetown Rocks, Joe Blocks, that we just did, what are the major events? What's the major draw in St. Joe that's going to be full?
College.
College,
Right.
yeah, parents coming to
But
visit
Yeah.
college.
Short term, I mean, but
It would be
that's
short term.
It's gonna be, like.
Football
we're gonna be
games.
called
Yeah. Parents come for the
In like
weekend.
a 1 week period.
Right.
Or some sort of event,
Right.
and then all of a sudden you've got the rest of the year with what?
That
What's the
burden's
draw?
upon the homeowner, not the city.
Right.
Right.
You know, I think we,
get it, but I'm just thinking. How big of a deal is this going to be if we don't have some tourist, some draw, like Brainerd Lakes has got a big draw to bring
Many
people in
different
for
things.
short term, a week vacation, 2 weeks. What's our draw? What's gonna bring in the tourists?
well, I think we talked about it too. It's you got your college.
Mhm.
A lot of people come back for the football games. A lot of
Okay.
alumni come back. I know we talked about it a little bit too, where. And maybe you want to elaborate for your work session and what you think the council thinks, but downtown commercial, like you have those apartments that go over the top. To your point, it's like if I'm a homeowner. I'm not gonna move out of my house for a weekend to let someone come in to live there because I already live here, but that's me. Someone else might wanna do that.
Some people do that.
I
Some
was
people
gonna say,
definitely do
you
that.
know, if I were up
I
there,
would
it didn't
say,
be
think
there
about
for-
snowbirds.
Right. True, yeah, if they only live here half the time.
And if they can make money by renting it out the other half of the
By
year.
renting it out for a couple of weeks or whatever.
And I don't know about you guys, I've rented many VRBOs and Airbnbs, that's actually what we prefer, cause it's a little easier, you get more amenities than a hotel.
And part of the interest too, from like a homeowner standpoint, if it is, I'm gonna use the snowbird example again, is they could rent that out, for multiple months to one tenant and have a set rate. Or they can try renting it out multiple nights, and then that rate over that duration of that month is gonna generate more money and more income to them. So there might be an appeal to do that.
Mhm.
So.
Most of us on the council during our work session expressed not regulating it at all, including the mayor. Because many of the issues that Nate laid out for us, they're self-correcting issues.
Mhm.
You have a noise problem, we have a noise ordinance for that. You got open bottle, we have laws for that.
Mhm.
So we can try and mire the homeowner in a whole bunch of legislation and rules to follow. But they already have to abide by all the rules of the city. So why do we need to be unduly burdensome and give them more?
Is a concern with the lack of housing though, like a lack of, long-term affordable housing for people that are actually here, versus you just buy it, just use it for, I don't know, I'm just asking the question, I guess. I don't know if that's was discussed at all or.
It's not something that we saw concern.
What about parking, especially in R1, the residential zone? You've got 5 or 6 people, cars, not people, but cars that show up and you've got a driveway and you can park one car in the driveway. And the rest of them are now on the street. And with the people around that get a little upset if they're there for 15, 20 days. Taking up parking spaces on the street.
They can be upset, but it's not illegal.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't see it as who's gonna come here and stay for 15 days unless there's really. I see what you're saying. I think the biggest people that you're gonna get are a lot of your alumni coming back for events.
Yeah.
For graduations, for Joetown
The big
Blocks,
events.
Joetown Rocks, maybe Oktoberfest, like those big events, maybe the Winter Walk. But, to your point, maybe not 15 weeks, but maybe like a weekend. Or because we have the roadway, we have the bed and breakfast, but that's not really substantial to house a lot of different people, but. Yeah,
And that is, I would say if the route is to, take the, kind of less regulatory route, it's probably still, I would say, in the best interest to at least insert like a definition of short-term rental and just have it permitted, across, if that was the route, and that's where it'd fall back to a lot of our other ordinances would apply. We'd probably still want to put something in there tied to a lodging tax component.
yeah.
I was just gonna bring that up.
So,
guess-
and there are, there could be potential concerns and, we only have the 2 lodging establishments in the community, but sometimes you'll hear concerns from, the lodging establishments in the community about short-term rentals and such. So something to think about too.
I guess for me, like what I'm thinking, when you start getting into those more residential areas, instead of not regulating at all, I think it's better to start with something, even if it's like a CUP, and then if it's not becoming an issue or there are no issues, then you could always say, oh, well, we could just.
Couldn't you like start off with not regulating it and then you see how crazy it gets in a year or two? Because you can always go back to.
I'll get
I
phone
think-
calls if that were the case.
Right? You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
You kind of look at it, to your point, if you don't regulate it, you kind of see what's happening for a year or two. And then if it starts blowing up and you start seeing some nuances in there that don't jive with what we want, well, then you reassess it.
But how does that work then if people are already kind of like grandfathered in under previous rules? I mean, and there's.
It
no
would
reg-
depend
no
on-
Regulation.
Yeah, it would depend on if we change anything, what we change it to, and then how that language that we craft. So if we were to update the ordinance and just say, okay, this is what a short-term rental is, and this is use that's permitted as long as there's lodging tax that it's being paid. And then if we went that route and someone did that and they're starting to become issues, we would still reserve the right to enhance the regulations. It wouldn't necessarily be a grandfathered case in that, I don't believe.
You could.
I'm
So
sure
there'd be
we'd,
some-
I'm sure we'd tie legal into it at some
So
point.
there'd be some wording in a way to allow.
Yeah, there'd be some wording. And I mean, the biggest unknown is none of us can answer the question of what is the demand, what would be the demand. Right now, we can't find any that are listed, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an interest or there isn't a demand for that. So, who knows? We could be making a pickle out of nothing or, yeah, so.
Good talk.
So so I have some guidance, I guess, and part of what I want to do too is update the council at a workshop level of the conversations that the planning commission is having. Maybe next time we come back with some goals on, okay, minimum regulation, no regulation. I just want to get a little bit more of the flavor of the planning commission. So I have direction for next time. If that works, getting that.
Sure.
Okay. I'll send up a follow-up, and then maybe through email, and then we'll go from there
Yeah.
on that. Okay.
All right, next item for old business 7B, honeybee discussion.
All right.
Adam's specialty.
But
Adam likes
I think Adam might be able to provide a better presentation than me. So this is also an item that came up at a council workshop. I think this one's so much more straightforward in the sense that I think the council was pretty unanimous in support and just we should allow this in our city. So what I did, and luckily I have a lot of research to pull from this. I went through this when I was in a previous community. So I attached that research in there, and how honeybees are typically regulated. And how we approached it with that community, even though it ultimately didn't pass, was basically through a regulation, just a permit process to make sure that, one, that there was appropriate setbacks, there's appropriate things put in place to not only protect, other potential conflicts that could occur, but also to ensure that there was some standards for like, folks when they are keeping honeybees on the property and such. So, again, this is one that, we can take bits and pieces from, kind of that sample language. Also threw in the memo, a variety of different other resources. If anyone else had an opportunity to review those, the University of Minnesota has a great tool where they actually list out like a lot of the communities that have regulations or don't, and you can kind of click on it and see. So, I don't know. What else am I missing, Adam?
What we had talked about in our previous work session at the city council is just allowing for the keeping of bees within city limits. And I've had it's either called the Central Minnesota or Tri-County Beekeepers Society around St. Cloud reach out to me. My wife is a beekeeper. She has 6 hives, not in city limits. We have 4 up by Bolus, 2 in Litchfield, and I think that's all she has.
That you know about.
But the reason why this is an important topic to me, and I've had other people approach us from the community, is a lot of people are concerned whether this is true or not, that like we have a significant and concerning decline in like pollinators. And for people that have like a garden at their house, if they still keep those, I do. Or if you want to have your own honey and keep bees, this is something that's not as daunting or scary as some people may believe it to be. Similar to other livestock, whether it be cattle or anything else, there's different breeds of bees you can be, and they have all different temperaments. Some can be so gentle that you don't need to wear a bee suit to handle and manage them. Like we have Italian bees and they're super laissez-faire. Like you can walk up to them, you can handle them, like they're not very aggressive. We don't get stung. We've also had Russians, which you may be unsurprised to learn are belligerent jerks. So the bees you like select and like where you place them on your property, some definitions that Nate outlined would be setbacks off of a property line. And that'd be no different than like building a fence, because you don't want to shove the fence right on the property line, because what if the neighbor also wants a fence? It's just a thing of being courteous. And some people have mentioned, well, what if your neighbors are allergic to bees? And both Kelly Beanick and Kevin Klusner are both allergic to bees, and they are both adamantly for this. Kevin says that on some property that he owns, he's allergic to bees and he allows friends to keep bees. He says he drives his lawnmower around them. It's not an issue.
And if you're allergic to bees, they kind of know what they need to do anyway.
And if somebody's allergic to bees, people have EpiPens.
Yeah.
Like people can be allergic to dogs. We got dogs all around town. Like I cook steaks all the time. My neighbors are vegan. It's like you just need to be respectful to like your neighbors. So I mean, if somebody dislikes bees, like you just don't shove it right on their property line and be a jerk neighbor.
And I think, when I went through this in another community, we probably spent 6 months going through like dialogue and research and such. And I think when it started off, there was a little bit of hesitancy, but then by the time we got through those 6 months, there was pretty general support at the commission level, just not at the council level. And one thing we did was, if you're gonna, if that would have passed, is if you're gonna have bees, that you have kind of at least a sign or something that just says that there's honeybees on the property or hives on the property, and that kind of just gives a FYI to folks as well.
Would it be a couple of things, fair to say, like you said, there's like different kinds of bees, some are much more aggressive than others. That you have an ordinance or in the ordinance that you would limit or identify what type of bee you can keep. I don't know if more aggressive ones produce more honey, Or, you know, if there's a reason for having something that's more aggressive, or could you limit it to the less aggressive type of bee? Yeah. still
There's
within-
pros and cons to the breed of bees, just like livestock or anything else. And the rationale for like the Russians is they're hardier. So like Minnesota is obviously pretty harsh temperament.
Yeah.
Mother Nature, we all live here. And they have better viability to survive a winter. And sometimes, you know, regardless of what you do to prepare for the winter to assist the bees that they're viable, they still won't make it. This year specifically, my wife Andrea had multiple beehives survive. We had a week in March where it was 70, and then we got 1.5 feet of snow.
Yeah.
So all the bees had come out, they're like, it's spring, this is great, and then snow. So it's like you can't predict or prevent that or assist your colony in any way to ensure they survive. The one thing we'd mentioned that I brought up in our discussion was we could potentially look at limiting to 2 hives, because a really common practice for beekeepers is if you have a wildly successful hive or column of boxes, you can split it into 2, because you increase their viability or likelihood of surviving the winter if they're in a smaller space. Because just like a house, they need to heat that the entire winter to stay alive. If they have a skyscraper, it's hard to heat that.
And that, and kind of leads into another question. You said you guys have 2 hives. It would go to, are you using the hives, and you're using the honey for your own personal use, or are you going to sell it at the farmer's market? And if you're selling it, you're gonna want more hives. And can you, in the ordinance, would you want to restrict the number of hives for personal use when you have your hives in a residential area? And move them to another location for commercial use? I don't know if there's a difference, and that needs to be outlined.
We didn't discuss like an individual homeowner owning more than 2. We just stated 2 per property. If like your whole block isn't beekeepers and you want to have a lock on your block where everybody gets 2 of your boxes, I mean, I guess that's fine because there's only 2 allowed per property.
And how we handled that too, Mark, was in the previous community, we looked at, well, if you're actively like selling like products like out of your home, like honey and such, then it's probably appropriate that you maybe look at like a home occupation permit. Because then you're, you know, using some of that as a commercial, you know, but it depends on the community and if you want to regulate it to that extent or not.
And I was just thinking in terms of 2 hives per property, you know, fine. But if all of a sudden it turns into a business and I want 4, 6, 8 hives to try to generate more business and more profit for me, now does that get to be too much in a residential area?
It wouldn't exhaust the resources for the bees because they'll travel up to 5 miles for pollen and water and food resources. So I mean, we could have bees on every property in St. Joe residentially, and they're gonna go out within a 5-mile radius of the town to do what they need to do to produce honey.
Is there a need to have, I mean, this is another one of those, and maybe maybe I haven't been in town for too long, but I would have never, if I wanted to have bees, I would have gotten bees and had them by my garden and been a happy little camper on my lot in St. Joe. So again, you know, maybe I need to pay a little more attention to my ordinances around me, but, I could see somebody saying, hey, I've got, you know, I've got a great garden, I've got flowers, I've got vegetables, I've got a bigger lot, a big yard. And my friend wants to keep bees. Is there a difference between the property owner having the bees and them letting somebody keep bees on their property too? I mean, that would be one thing that I would think we might want to address as well,
My question is,
if we were gonna address
you
it.
and your wife, for the 6 that you have, do you guys have to have permits or licenses for the
No.
ones that you have where they are?
We have some in Litchfield city limits, no permit, nothing required, and 4 in Bolus, rural Bolus, so nothing in the countryside.
Okay. I guess not as dense though population where they are, or is it?
It's moderately dense in Litchfield.
Okay. Just, you know, like to your point, it's like, do you license it so the person that owns the property is the one that has to have the license? So it gets away from like, hey, I've got bees, can I put them on your property?
Right, you know, I mean,
I see what you're.
I don't know that I would care either way, but at the same time, I think there's a difference between the homeowner and their own personal beehive and the homeowner's property and somebody else's beehive on it. I mean, that would be something that I would be curious if we wanted to look at more in depth. I think to your point, is if they're wildly successful and all they want to put 6 or 8 hives on there, whatever, I think that right there becomes, then it is more of a home occupation. I think you could probably funnel it down that direction.
And I like how you
something
put the.
like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can,
Yeah,
you could say if you go let's say you go the less regulatory route, you can, say that, a residential property has the right to keep up to 2 hives without a permit or a license, but anything above that, then you have to get a license or whatever the procedure is. So.
I like your density thing here too.
And just kind of going back to something that you said earlier too about. You want to be friends with your neighbors, you don't want, as long as everybody's okay with it. Fine, but what if what if people in the community around, if somebody's got a couple of hives and there's people around there that are complaining because the bees are more of a nuisance? Do we need to have anything in place to regulate that kind of a nuisance if the complaints start coming?
I think it's something like the short-term rentals where we would wait to see what occurs.
Sure.
I have a question too, just kind of building on that a little bit too, and I know nothing about bees. I actually like the idea of it a lot, but so you got your neighbor kids are playing ball. They throw the ball over the fence or whatever, they hit the hive. Is that any kind of danger there to them to get, a swarm or anything like that? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out. I don't.
If you like agitate a
Wonderful.
hive, like the bees are gonna come out and they'll do something that's called pinging you. They'll like run into your head and they're not stinging you, but they're like literally trying to verify, are you a threat? Like there's
Yeah.
certain things that you don't do, like you don't want to wear all black because all natural predators to bees are black. Bears.
Good.
Interesting.
Well, like
But the kids are gonna.
I shouldn't be
right?
doing
That's,
beekeeping in this t-shirt
Yeah.
because like black bears, raccoons, skunks, badgers, everything that attacks bees, it's black in nature.
Mhm.
And something that sounds like a misnomer or a joke, but you shouldn't eat bananas before you handle bees because like the scent or pheromone that's given off by bananas literally agitates bees. So there's certain things that'll like agitate them. And if like a ball flies and hits the hive, they'll be agitated, but they don't necessarily know where it came from. If the kids run across the property line into your
Mhm.
property to go get their ball, maybe.
I look at it, your point, like I've got what I would call 4 nuisances of the kids, that are very, very interested in stuff like that.
Right.
Like,
So they,
like that would be
Yeah.
my only concern, like if the kids did something, it's like, well, you did their bit, you know what they look like. Like, I'm for it, but that's those, like you said, the what ifs. You're not gonna know until you
Right.
let it happen and then something
Well,
happens. It's always the what ifs.
And it's not my concern of 1 or 2 stings probably either. It would be
Right.
multiple, right? If somebody is really allergic to it and then all of a sudden they get several, now they really make them mad or they're wearing black or they just ate bananas or whatever the situation is and they run over there. And then, all of a sudden they're getting attacked by 10 bee, or more, I don't know, but maybe that goes back to the
My
type
kids are
of bee
fast.
too, that you were saying, is there something with, do you not allow certain type of bee or the less aggressive or something like that? I don't know. And I like the idea of it. I really do.
I like honeybees. We need them.
Yeah,
Right,
we need them.
right.
We need them.
Yeah.
That's what's hungry.
I just know, like I said, if my
That's the thing.
kid throws a ball at a hive and gets stung, they probably deserve it. Like,
Right.
that's just me.
It's true.
I love my
We've all
kids,
been
but-
there.
I
guess-
guess if we do something with the ordinance and modify it, it'd be really neat to put some information, some public
Yeah.
information out on the city's website, just saying,
Yeah,
hey, did you
Yep.
know that bees are XYZ? And use it as a
Tool.
learning
Yeah.
tool.
There you go.
I think that'd be really beneficial, just from the little bit that you shared tonight. I
Yeah.
found it very interesting. I mean, I've got friends that have dabbled in it and I've,
We need some
seen them, but it was still really neat.
And just got sand.
Fresh ice samples?
I just had banana before I came over. here.
I guess
You're not
reading
black
through it,
and
I
white.
kind of like the idea of it just because our neighborhood, we have mostly wasps and, they're everywhere. So bees would be nice. Like they're way less aggressive.
Have them do like
wasps and like other things, like, do they attack bees too? Or if there's like, if you have bees on your property and there's like a wasp nest, like, is it territorial or?
It is, like, if you have a wasp problem and you introduce a large colony of bees, the bees will compete and typically win.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Good.
So
That's
like
good to
they're-
hear.
They're not gonna like invade a wasp nest,
Right.
but if you have wasps in your garden and the honeybees are there pollinating flowers and vegetables and things, they're going to compete for those resources and try to kick them out.
Okay.
So the wasps are more than likely leave on their own accord, because they're gonna be like, there's no food or resources for us here.
So you could make the analogy too, the Russian bees are probably where the Italian bees, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
We had a lot of jokes about, we had jokes about French bees. I don't know if French bees are a thing, but it's, you could imagine where that might go.
I have so many things going. So, no.
So I mean, overall, I'm kind of hearing a less kind of regulatory kind of approach with bees, like some standards, but don't overburden it. We all support
Well, I think
ordinance
people that
change.
want to keep it, it's not like they're gonna go haywire, right?
Right.
In my eyes.
I think just some minimum standards and guidance.
Yeah,
No
I agree.
regulations.
I think
Yeah.
a sign or something, or
Yeah.
just, just so they know.
Limit it
Okay.
to
There.
tribes
But-
and, you know, if you got the fly, what do you call it, the fly?
Like
Flyaway
the
barrier?
flies.
Airway, the flyaway type thing, you know, something like that. I don't know if that's critical, but if you've got the hive right up next to a property line, you know, within 6 feet, having some sort of a barrier, or not a barrier, but so that the bees fly up instead of
Mhm.
over.
Well, to your point too, it's also a educational piece for
Yeah,
the city,
absolutely.
like. I did not know that they hated black and bananas.
Yeah.
Good to know, but.
So I just think, you know, like we said, nothing, no firm, regulations, but some guidance,
Mhm.
Yeah, and
some minimum standards.
I see your permit, like, is the one that says the city of Sartell, they need a permit, but city of Sartell is 20,000 people, St. Joe is six, seven when
yeah.
the students are here, right?
It's a little different if you have 20,000, 30,000 people in the city.
I guess I liked the idea of like setbacks from property lines.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I kind of like the density thing. Just
Yeah,
because, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like, we have an acre lot and we're in
Yeah.
town. I mean, we could essentially then have,
Or whatever it was, or
8.
or.
Did we do anything with setbacks when we looked at, did we allow chickens? This is so
No.
long ago. We did not allow chickens.
The only place that you can have chickens is in the rural residential area.
Cause I remember that was up in front of us one year.
The city of St. Cloud allows for chickens.
Mhm.
Kennels, do we have any restrictions on like any setbacks on like dog kennel?
We've got restrictions in rural residential and in the city for kennels for dogs.
For kennels for setbacks.
Yeah.
Typically it's outside of the easement areas at minimum, just because it's a paved concrete surface or whatever, usually for those.
Theory.
Yeah, right, in theory, yeah. In a good kennel situation or whatever, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I think, I think that would, I mean, in my opinion, minimal. Let's allow them, let's put the minimal restrictions, let's, I think those density, yeah, and I think the density makes sense.
So just a question, so in terms of the density stuff, what are the thoughts of, if there's let's say there's a cap on, okay, you can have 2 hives per property, but you don't need a permit, and then above that, you need a permit or that. Am I hearing that, or is
Yeah,
that
well, I
not?
think if someone wants more than that, they probably are doing it for more of a business purpose, unless, like, would you agree with that?
Most of the people that are selling honey at farmers markets are cottage bakers. So they're working under the guidelines already set by the state, where they're not trying to make like a commercial business out of their house or otherwise. They just want to, sell something on the side to make a little money for their household or for themselves. And they're trying to not be limited what they're doing.
Right.
It's exactly what my wife does.
But at that point, if you're selling, I've looked at this a little bit with maple syrup, but if you're selling it from your house, you don't need that cottage bakers or that cottage license, do you? I don't think you do at that point. If you're literally just, like, if you're not going to a market and selling it, but you're selling it from your house,
If it's out of your house, you don't need it.
right?
But if you're at a craft show, a
Yep.
farmer's market, a trade show,
Yep,
then you're supposed to try and register with the state and get an actual cottage baker license number.
yep, okay.
But you're still not regulated by the food and drug or anything
Right.
like that.
But I think to your point, you're saying is if they go above and beyond that, it probably should come back for more of a discussion of more than two. Is that what you're saying?
I guess, yeah, bluntly, my question is, is there support from the planning commission to, put a cap on, okay, you can have so many hives just outright, like it's permitted, and then above that, then, maybe there should be more regulatory steps or a permit at least. Or am I hearing just a permit across the board, no matter how many hives you?
I don't like the idea.
I don't think you need a permit.
Okay,
I think if you go above and beyond, that, I want 15 hives on.
Well, I
Just-
like that
just
density
those-
table.
The
we
density
have.
one.
That,
Just
yeah,
Bella's point, if you got-
Okay.
if You got 5 acres, 10
Right.
acres.
Yeah.
In the rural residential area, can you have more than 2 hives without any problem? Should there be some sort of minimum standard for different size
Yep.
areas?
so in theory, basically, take this table on the hives that we have, and anything above that, if it's this size lot, then maybe there should be a permit or some other process. Okay,
Anywhere from like 20,000 to 100,000, depending on how large you make the hive.
Okay.
Okay.
So the different
Yeah,
sizes
it's
of
fair.
hives.
That's
do you
fair.
say?
That's cool.
Yeah, it depends how you build out the hive.
Where do you get your bees from then? Like,
A lot of people get them from like California or Mexico.
just buy them?
You can order like what's called a nuke, so you get like a queen and some worker bees. So then that's like literally shipped to you in a box, and that's like your starter pack to have like a beehive. So you have a queen, set of worker bees. You can buy just a queen, like if your queen dies and it needs replacing, it's like an army with no leader. You have 10,000 bees and no queen. Like the queen directs them, leads them, they all work for that one bee.
What's the
And-
noise level that comes up from?
It's like a very soft hum.
quieter than any generator you're gonna be on. I mean, just for reference, I mean, I would say.
Oh, that's cool.
awesome. Well, I have some direction, so I'll come back next month with just some drafted stuff and that based on the feedback. So, thank you.
All right, 7C, general updates.
Yes, I'm gonna fly through these here. The items that were at the May Planning Commission meeting were, all those items were approved, minus the text amendment. The text amendment, though, ultimately did get approval at the last council meeting. And that was for the Tyler Bragelman project where there was multiple buildings on one lot and such. The council just wanted to limit that language to just the industrial district. So those just apply for the industrial district. The House of Hearn, the Synergy site, old gas station, working through the civils. We're still awaiting the civil submittal for that. But they are hoping to break ground after the 4th of July is kind of their goal, as long as they can get through the remaining steps with us, from an administrative standpoint. Hanson and Companies, that project, they're hoping to break ground end of June. We're still going through some of the civils and such for that project as well. But June is their goal. The Joint Planning Board, John, you're the only one up here that's on that. Carmi's the other rep. Put in your calendar potentially July 9th or August 13th as potential dates.
You'll email.
Yeah, I'll let you know. It's preliminary right now. But basically, I just want to give you a heads up on that. August 13th. So I think that's the second Tuesday of August. So second Tuesday in August at 7 p.m.
So I don't think I can make that. So
Okay. That's fine. We have Carmi and then we also have Bob and then Mayor Rick that are on there.
Again, I think I'm coming back that day, so put it out there and
Okay. Other than that, I will be out of the office next Wednesday through the 26th. So I will be on vacation.
any updates on like the gas station, Casey's? Any inquiries?
They've received many inquiries. I wouldn't say many, they've received a good amount of inquiries. Like a lot of real estate, I think it's just coming down to price. There was, they purchased it for X price. They want to sell it for X price. They did have the preference at first of having a tenant in there and still retaining ownership. I just haven't had an update on that's part of the situation, but I know they've received interest.
Okay.
For the other one, SA, I have not got an update on that from the owner. Any other
Alright.
questions? Great River Energy's got their complete power line removed over in the industrial park. So like Promotional Resources has broken ground and is expanding out there. And that's going to open up all those other back lots for others who purchase adjacent lots, which is fantastic because we didn't know where that was going to go. And it all happened pretty quickly and they got out there and removed it and everything, vacated it. So yeah.
Updates on the bridge opening?
I've heard it's been delayed a little bit.
This weekend, so if they're pouring street, that's another 28 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened to the
Obviously,
second week?
Yeah.
Mild
That'll
winter.
be a bus
It's
kill.
supposed to-
Yeah.
When are
Yeah.
they closing
After
over,
the-
after the bridge is done, then
Yeah.
they're gonna close one
Yeah.
3 over,
Yeah.
or,
Oh, they're gonna
like-
work on 75 first.
okay, yeah,
Yep.
75 first, and then they're gonna close the.
Yeah, they're not gonna close that street for the roundabout until the bridge is done, and then they're gonna move to that one. And then there'll be 2 phases as part of that one.
Do you think, so 28 days, oh my gosh, is that-
Yeah.
That's like 4th of July.
that's what I was gonna say, is it
We
gonna?
might need by the 4th of July, but probably not. I mean, big stuff. We're just gonna really sing for everybody involved.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna disrupt my commute from Sartell to here.
I would,
Yeah.
you're Sartell, you gotta go way around.
Yeah. So no going home for my lunch break anymore. Dang it.
I just didn't know if they let the city know anything as far as what they're.
Yeah, so the update that I got this morning at our department head from the engineer was just that it's been delayed. I couldn't tell you the days and all that, so yeah, I'm sure they'll be releasing something here in the near future though.
Alright.
Okay. All right, any other business? Discuss?
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're done.
Oh, it's not.